Hello, you're watching a replay of the Facebook Live. Today we're talking about the true costs to import 20-foot container to New Zealand and how to save money. And we're starting right now. My name is Max, and this is Alex.
Hi guys, it's great to be back.
And if you want to learn more about different business tactics, tools, and how to import or export goods to New Zealand, then start now by subscribing to our channel.
Awesome. So Max, if I'm an importer and I want to bring a 20-foot container from any country to New Zealand, where do I start?
Well, first of all, Alex, let's point out a picture, and it's very important for you to realize that your situation is going to be different to another business. It's going to depend on the amount of shipments you're going to have per year, because the more shipments you have per month, obviously the cheaper it is. And it's going to depend on the type of goods you're going to import, right, Alex? So, because why does it matter what type of goods you import?
Definitely. It could be timber, or it could be fragile goods, could be dangerous goods, and all these type of goods, they have different surcharges on top of them, right?
Exactly. So today we're going to talk about a general dry commodity. For example, what could be? Furniture, tiles?
Yeah, could be tiles, furniture, could be some basic, even foodstuffs.
Appliances,
yeah,
electric appliances.
So anything which doesn't require extra handling or extra care or any
special care.
extras. And if you do have a different type of goods and you think that your cargo might be special, talk to us later and we will be happy to explain it all after online chat, right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
And by all means, if you have any questions, feel free to type them now in the comments below, and we will be happy to answer. So let's continue. The other important thing for this talk is that the rates will depend on the exchange rate and whether it's a peak season or off-peak season. For example,
yeah, we narrowed it down here for $1 for the sake of this exercise. Yeah, we have 72 cents New Zealand. That's what it is currently. It might change quite rapidly, but we will try to base it on this exchange rate.
So, for example, if you import any goods right before the holiday season, like Christmas, New Year's, expect to pay double, at least 10 to 20%, because there will be a huge demand on space. The other peak season is when?
Yeah, it could be especially in different countries. It could be peak season for some types of fruit. For example, there's going to be a lot of fruit containers coming in, so they will be filling the space, and because those type of goods, they usually shipped in freight containers, and freight containers are much more expensive than dry containers. So the priority will always be given to reefer cargo rather than dry. So if you want to stick in your dry container, you will have to pay more.
Absolutely. Another popular season is China holiday, which starts sometime in February, right?
February. Early February, yeah, and it goes for 2 weeks.
2 weeks,
yeah.
Yes.
2 weeks, and yes, pretty much it's before that it's really hard.
So you have to start booking in January if you want to get space before China closes down. All right. Another assumption for today's talk is that we're gonna discuss FOB shipping terms, Inca terms, which means that your supplier will be responsible for all the local charges in their own country, and you will be responsible for ocean freight from the closest port to your closest port in New Zealand, right? Did I forget anything else? Any other assumptions?
No, I think that's about it. And if you did forget something, we'll come back to it later.
Yeah, once again, feel free to ask any questions during this talk. All right.
So once again, back to my original question. I'm an importer, and let's start from the closest neighbor, say Australia, and I want to import a 20-foot container of general cargo from Australia to New Zealand. Where do I go, and what do I expect to pay?
Right. So obviously, talk to a local company in New Zealand and get at least 3 quotes. Right.
By local company, you mean what kind of company?
Like a freight forwarder, customs broker, because if you've never done it before, you want to get all the possible information. And a local freight forwarder is like a travel agent. They'll know all the import requirements. They'll know all the tips and tricks and all the hidden costs.
Would a shipping line be a good choice?
Well, you can try and see whether they will be able to give you all the information.
Let's say I'm just starting to import. Would it be the best choice for me?
First of all, they don't have customs brokers in many cases, so they won't be able to tell you how much you're gonna pay in taxes, what are the requirements for wood or.
So I'm not gonna know the full picture.
Well, you can ask, but I can guarantee you that they won't be able to tell you the full breakdown of costs, so you can budget. So by all means, give it a go, but you'll see it for yourself that they won't give you the full service that you want. So talk to at least 3 companies in New Zealand, get the full price, get the full breakdown, and what I was talking about? We were talking about Australia, right? So you want to import a 20-foot container. That's the first case. We're going to talk about other countries, Australia, Asia, the States, and Europe, but we're going to start with Australia first. So we're going to discuss 3 major ports in Australia. There would be Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne. And you want to send a container to 3 major ports in New Zealand: Auckland, Tauranga, Christchurch. The rates are going to be very similar. So expect to pay $450 for one 20-foot container. $450 for one 20. That's just the ocean freight from port to port. It doesn't include any local fees in Australia. So once again, I repeat, your supplier in Australia will have to organize the tracking, export clearance, loading to the closest port in Australia, whether it's Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane.
Are there any restrictions of how big my cargo can be? How much can I put into the container?
Yes, there are restrictions in terms of weight. So you expect about 22 tons of weight just of the goods itself, because you have to allow for the weight of the container around 3 tons as well, because you've got New Zealand road weight limitations. You can go higher, but you will have to pay extra fees. So if you go over 24 ton, you're gonna pay at least extra 100 New Zealand dollars surcharge in New Zealand. The ocean freight will be the same, but there will be surcharges in New Zealand.
So once again, it's better to consult with someone, with the professional before loading the container.
Yes. But there is a limit, structural limits to the container. And once again, different shipping lines, they've got different containers. So talk to the freight forwarder. They can accommodate you with whatever you want to ship. So it's freight, right? So what's the next step?
I have another question. What's the transit time from Australia?
It's going to be at least 7 days port to port. I would allow at least 7 days, maybe even 10 days if you want to be safe, if you've never done it before.
So that's just for the deep sea transportation?
Yeah, 7 days roughly, yeah. Because you have to always allow there will be delays, weather delays, mechanical delays, port strikes, like what's happening right now in Christchurch. So I would say 7 days. Right, so once it arrives to the major port in New Zealand, what's the next step? What you have to do as an importer? How would you describe it?
I would guess I will have to pay some destination charges. And so the container must go through a certain procedures to be unloaded, handled, unpackaged, and customs cleared.
Yes, but you even have to start your work before it arrives to New Zealand, because sometimes New Zealand customs could be very busy. So we suggest to submit all the customs documents. I mean, you can submit it 1 day before it arrives, but the sooner the better. 7 days is better than 1 day before it arrives. 2 weeks is better than 7 days.
Well, I can't do 2 weeks because there's only 7 days transit time, so you only will get the documents 1 week before the arrival date.
Mm-hmm.
So it's especially with Australia, you have to be very cautious and careful, and try to speed this process up as much as you can. Especially if you're dealing with original documents, you have to organize the courier of original documents as soon as possible.
That's a good point. Yes. So New Zealand charges for a 20-foot container. Once the ship arrives, for example, at Auckland, Tauranga, Christchurch port, you would have to unload it from the ship, do the customs clearance, pay the shipping line document fees, and move this container out of the port to a customs bonded warehouse. And this process would cost you anywhere between $1,100 to $1,200, but we will take $1,100 New Zealand dollars. Yes, 1,100 New Zealand dollars. And that includes New Zealand port fees to unload the container from the ship, put it on the ground, customs brokerage fees, if it's a simple, once again, general cargo.
Does it include any tax?
No, it doesn't.
So
we're going to talk about
tax.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the tax later. Yes, the tax is extra. Then the document fees, and to hire the truck to move the container from the port to a customs bonded warehouse. And once again, that assumes that you've got your own storage facility, because you can book your own storage facility that has customs bonded license, and then you can unload it.
It's not just customs, right? It's
and
also,
MPI by security license, and then you can unload it together with a MPI approved officer and save some costs here. If you're gonna do as much work as much labor as you can yourself, but by all means you can hire a freight forwarder to move the container to the port, to their own warehouse, to a third-party logistics warehouse, but you have to pay extra, I don't know, $400, $500 New Zealand dollars to unload it, because labor in New Zealand is unfortunately very expensive. And then you'd have to, once again, hire another truck to move the pallets from the third-party warehouse to your own warehouse.
So let me double check with you again. So I can't take the container out of the port and put it on my backyard, for example.
No, because New Zealand customs and New Zealand MPI by security is very strict with what's coming in. So they want everything to be checked by licensed and approved people, by trained personnel.
Why can't they do it at the port?
Well, they do, but you're going to pay extra, because it's more expensive to pay and do anything at the port. You can unload it at the port, but you're going to pay at least, I don't know, 20 to 30% more.
Right. So once the container in New Zealand, in Auckland, say, we'll just pay that amount of money, $1,100, and we get our goods unpackaged and delivered to the door.
No.
For
$1,100, the container will travel from the port to your own customs approved and MPI approved warehouse.
Okay, there's no trucking in there.
Well, the container trucking. Okay. You hire the truck to move it from the port to your own customs approved and MPI approved warehouse. And then you can unload it yourself. Obviously, you have to have a license from MPI to do that, but you can get it. You just have to pay some extra fees.
Cool. So what's next?
That's your favorite topic, taxes, right? So you're gonna pay import taxes in New Zealand. How much? Say for 10,000 if you buy a container and it's...
No, let's stay away from the numbers for now. So basically there's two types of tax in New Zealand for the import of the goods. First one is a duty. Duty is currently slowly phasing out, and there's lots of preferential duties, and on many types of goods from many countries, you don't have to pay a single dollar, of duty these days. And it's actually more and more concessions coming for that. So I expect that in a few years' time, there would be very little type of goods which would require you to pay duty. But for now, let's say from Australia, you don't have to pay any duty on any types of products made in Australia. But if you're shipping something from Australia which was made in a different country, you would probably have to pay from 5% to 10% duty off, and it's 5% to 10% of the cost of the goods.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first type of tax you have to pay upon importation. The second one is GST. So GST is a common tax which is paid for all the goods in trade, and it's 15%. Basically, you will have to add your cost of the goods, add to freight, add some duty, and that combined cost multiplied by 15%, that would be your GST. We can provide a link to a customs website where they have a very easy table which helps you to calculate that sort of charges, whether you have to pay the charges or not, and what kind of charges you have to pay. Of course, you can be very, very specific, and their website is very generic again. But that's why you need a customs broker, and that's why you have a customs broker to consult with him, preferably way before you ship your goods to New Zealand. So these are the two types of tax you have to pay upon import.
What if I import alcohol?
If you're importing alcohol or tobacco, there would be a different type of tax called excise duty. And as we agreed before, we do not want to discuss anything out of the ordinary. So once again, if you have a question about it, we will be most happy to help you aside this talk, right? Cool.
Exactly. So it's important to remember that we're going to talk about general type of goods, because there are a lot of hidden costs that you want to find out before you pay your supplier and before you make a commitment. So talk to your local freight forwarder.
Just let me add something. Once again, we just discussed customs requirements and customs fees. So there might be some fees from a range of different organizations, and they all nowadays they all under one umbrella in New Zealand called Ministry of Primary Industries. But that ministry actually combines a lot of other smaller ministries inside of it, and your goods might be the subject of say, for example, environmental authority interest, and you would need some kind of permits or some kind of a special treatment done to the goods. Or your goods could be subject of medical safety or food safety, and these are all different types of authorities, or forestry and agriculture ministry. So these all different types of goods which do require different types of treatment, certification, and obviously the charges will be very, very different from one commodity to another. For general cargo, all you need to know is you have to go through two major departments in government departments: New Zealand Customs and General Biosecurity.
Mm-hmm.
So if all goes well, this part of the import only cost you the tax plus $50 of customs transaction fee. That's pretty much it.
All right, guys. If you've just joined us, I want to remind that we are talking about how to import a 20-foot container of general goods from any part of the world to New Zealand, how to avoid hidden fees and save money. And if you enjoyed this kind of information, Please subscribe and join us every week, because we're gonna deliver interesting information with different insights. The next
wait, we haven't discussed one of the extras. What about insurance? So there would be an extra.
Good point. Yes, insurance. Cargo insurance is a document which protects your cargo if an accident happens. And in many cases, if you import general cargo, it's going to be minimum roughly 200 New Zealand dollars for the full container. Or allow 1% of the total insured amount. So for example, if you import $50,000 worth of goods, roughly it's going to be 500 New Zealand dollars. You can negotiate cheaper prices. For example, if you increase your excess to $1,000, maybe you're going to pay, I don't know, 300 New Zealand dollars, 400 New Zealand dollars for the insurance premium for the same value of the goods for $50,000.
Who do I go and ask for the insurance? Can I go to a supplier directly?
Yes, there are three ways to get the insurance: from the supplier, directly from the insurance broker, or from the freight forwarder, the customs broker. So once again, get quotes and compare. We offer insurance to our clients. You can buy insurance from overseas supplier, but in our experience, people don't get the required service, especially when something does happen and you get some goods damaged in New Zealand and the insurance was done overseas. I don't think you're gonna get any money, because if it's based somewhere, I'm not gonna name any countries, but if they don't have a local office in New Zealand, first of all, you could have what are the problems? Do you remember any problems? Or anything that could happen?
Goods?
No, not with the goods, but with getting a claim sorted. What do you think could be the problems? If it's something
Breakdown in communication, just lack of customer service, misunderstandings, some requirements which you didn't know about, which were not explained to you correctly, and you can't really talk through it because the insurance company is based somewhere, God knows where. Yeah,
and they could be speaking foreign language. I mean, you've saved money on the insurance premium. Instead of paying $200, you've paid $50. But then, is it actually working? Yeah. Have you ever actually seen the insurance certificate? And have you read it? Does it cover all risks, or is it just limited? So be careful with what you buy. Make sure you read the certificate, you read the policy. I know many people won't read the policy, but at least read the summary. Get the summary. Ask your insurance broker to explain what are the main things. What else? What if I import general cargo, but it's got some wooden pallets, wooden crates? What could be the extra costs?
Wooden pallets or wooden crates or any other wooden goods themselves could be a subject of fumigation. Well, New Zealand government is very cautious about nasty things coming in our country. By this I mean could different insects, larvae of different insects, soil, some plants, nasty plants, and that sort of stuff. So chances are, if you bring something of wooden nature, of wood or timber in it, it will be a subject of Agricultural and Forestry Authority. And once again, talk to the broker, and he will advise you what has to be done in advance. It can be either you can do fumigation in your own country, make sure that the wooden packages are stamped with a proper mark, yeah, and it's as far as I know, the standard is ISPM 15.
Yes.
Make sure it's done, and that will reduce the cost, reduce the probability of inspection. But if MPI requires you to do fumigation or cleaning or any sort of treatment to the goods, you have to do it by law, and that would be at your own cost. And these costs can go from a couple of $100 to thousands of dollars. So it's better to do your homework well in advance. And if you think that your goods might be the subject of requirement for MPI clearance, then definitely discuss it before the goods are here.
Especially if you registered the company recently and this is your first container, because from our experience, the government tends to treat these kind of importers as a high risk, and you will have a higher chance of being randomly inspected, whether it's X-ray the port, which once again you're gonna pay.
It's more talking about the customs side, because if it's MPI, then once you're importing timber, it's importing timber. So there's no exceptions if you're importing timber for 10 years or it's your first shipment. But with the customs, yes, you're right, 100%. If you only just registered, then you will be the subject of customs inspections maybe first 3 to 4 times.
Have you noticed that whether MPI inspects with the same regularity, whether it's a new importer or
MPI will inspect your container always when you don't have enough documents to support your to meet the requirements for the goods. So if all documents are done correctly, and by law they don't have to inspect the goods, you will only inspect it if something
is missing.
Something is missing. But in many cases, there's a compulsory requirement to inspect the cargo. Like these days, there's a scare of a bug from Italy and US. So the MPI will inspect 100% of cargoes coming from those countries. And it doesn't matter what kind of documents you present to them.
Yeah.
So just be aware of it, and you will only know that if you talk to a specialist.
All right. Is there anything else we should mention in the extras?
Treatments here.
And Alex was talking about MPI inspections and the documents. One common mistake that we see importers do is that they don't get the quarantine declaration done by the supplier, and it has to be done by the supplier or the company that's packing the container. If you don't do it soon enough in advance, and you're not going to present it to the MPI biosecurity, chances are that your container will be inspected, and you're going to pay at least, I don't know, $300 for the warehouse handling fees.
True.
MPI officer inspection time.
I have a good question. When you ask ask any shipping line or any broker or any shipping agent about the quote, they usually come up with a long list of different types of charges. So why there's so many charges, and why don't they have just simple as 1, 2, 3?
It's a good question. Well, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they had even a bigger shopping list. So it's getting better. But yes, I agree, it's not easy even for me sometimes when you get different quotes from different shipping lines. It could have different currencies, different surcharges, different terms and conditions, different adjustments, different exchange rates. And yeah, it could be very confusing. And the reason for this, because when it travels from far away, you will have a lot of different transshipments, you'll have a lot of different surcharges, and all of them could change depending on peak season, and it's gonna depend on demand and global fuel prices. So there will be a lot of adjustments. I mean,
so basically there is no firm figure. So tomorrow this figure will be different. The whole thing will be different.
Not tomorrow, but I mean, yeah, I know you. What are you trying to say? Probably next month. Yeah, they change slightly every month, and the reason you see the big shopping list is for the transparency. So you can see, hey, if the exchange rate went down or up by, I don't know, 10 cents, you see the bottom line has changed. You will see that ocean freight was the reason.
So when I'm given a quote, for how long is it valid?
In many cases, it's valid till the end of the month. So you could be safe till the end of the month that the rate will be valid. But obviously, read the terms and conditions for your proposal. Sometimes it will say 7 days, sometimes it will say 14 days, sometimes it will say till the end of the month. So what's the
another question is how many days do I have to allow for the container to go through all these local areas of different clearances?
So let's sum up. You've got roughly 7 days from Australia to the major port in New Zealand. Then I would allow a couple of days for booking at the port, at New Zealand port, and then moving the container from the port to your warehouse. So that's already 9 days. And that's about it. If you've done all your homework far in advance, if you've done all your paperwork correctly, then you shouldn't have any delays unless you've got any customs or Mpi inspections. Then it's going to be very straightforward. So and then, I mean, I don't know how many days it's going to take you to unload the container, maybe within 1 or 2 days. So say within 10 days after it's been loaded on the ship in Australia, you will most likely get your goods if everything is done right.
Right.
So that's a 20-foot container. What's the total, Alex? Can you work out the total roughly?
Well, the total freight and New Zealand charges is what, around $1,800. But then you have your taxes, and then you have insurance and the possible treatment charges. So,
let's talk about the
total
minimum and then possible extras.
Total will be
$1,800
for freight.
For shipping, not for freight.
And New Zealand dollars 1,800. Max can be
extra fees.
All these extra fees, and that depends on.
Yeah, so it's very hard to say what will be the extra fees. Hopefully, nothing will occur in your situation. If you've done everything properly, obviously you pay the taxes. You can't, as I say, you can't avoid death and taxes.
Yeah.
So you'll have to pay that, but all the other things you can minimize if you.
Right. So how freight different from country to country, from area to area?
Before we go that, you want me to ask about the difference between a 40-foot container, right? In this case.
If you want, yeah.
So as a bonus, I know we are talking about a 20-foot container, but it's quite easy to budget for a 40-foot container. You simply multiply this figure, $1,800, by 1.7, and you get an estimate for a 40-foot container. So, for example, if it's 1,800, so it's around 3,000 New Zealand dollars for a 40-foot container minimum. And then
so
your
the 40-foot is twice as big as 20-foot, but why is it's not times 2, just 1.7?
Because there is the same amount of work required by the ship, well, similar amount of work required by the shipping line. You just have to pay obviously a bit more for space. That's why you pay 70%, not 100% more. So you have to allow obviously something.
Right, cool. We're ready to go to a different area?
Yeah. If we talk about the next most popular origin, that would be Asia, and mainly that would be China. All the major ports in China, they expect to pay similar costs, around, how much did they say, $950.
950.
So it's extra $500. So to keep it simple, if you take all the discussed prior costs and add $500, that's how much it's going to be for you to import one 20-foot container of general goods from any major port, seaport in China to Auckland, Tauranga, or Christchurch.
Awesome.
So how much will it be in total? Did you work out? No? $950 US, and that's $1,400. So it's $2,500 roughly.
And New Zealand,
yeah.
2.5.
2.5. And that's a 20-foot container.
20 foot.
20 foot and a 40-foot container times 1.7. 4,300 New Zealand dollars estimate. once again, it's going to depend how many containers are you planning to import during the year, and how difficult your commodity, and how long is your invoice. Because if it's just one page or half page invoice with, I don't know, 10 different items.
Is there a way I can bring this cost down, especially around this area here?
Ocean freight?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I would say always shop around. That's the easiest, and negotiate. Get at least 3 quotes, and the cheapest is not always the best. And the reason is, if you get an offer from an overseas supplier, doesn't matter which country, you don't get the full picture. Because if they say it's $1,000 to ship the container, or $2,000, whatever the price is, but they don't break it down for you, so you don't know whether it includes the delivery or customs clearance in New Zealand. On top of that, there could be another middleman in New Zealand. So you pay your supplier for shipping, and then there will be another middleman in New Zealand, another broker or another company that wants to collect extra fees for their service.
10% or 15% on top of all these local charges.
Yeah, at least, if you're lucky. So I would always, especially for the first time, at least once, unless you don't know the full process and you haven't done it, I don't know, a couple of times, use a local freight forwarder, because you're going to be protected by the local law, and you will get full breakdown without any hidden costs. All right. So we discussed Australia.
China. Yeah.
We discussed Asia. Pretty much China, Asia, Vietnam, Thailand.
So it would be similar rates.
Similar rates. 2,000, 2,500 for a 20-foot container. And how much did you say for a 40? 4,300 New Zealand dollars. All right.
What else do we have? US, United States.
The next would be Europe. So Europe is actually not that much more expensive than Asia. I would say add another $100 on top.
Mm-hmm. Which it's come 1050.
Yes. Once again, the same process. Obviously, it's going to be the transit. You're going to ask me about what's the transit time from the major ports in China. That would be at least 3 to 4 weeks. And from Europe, that's double, at least 50 days.
50 days, so
50
it's almost 2 months.
All right, so just add another $100. I think it's easy for you to work out. I'm not going to convert it to New Zealand dollars, right?
No, that's fine. So Europe.
That's Europe. And now we're going to talk about US West Coast.
West Coast, this is the closest coast to New Zealand.
That's Los Angeles.
Yeah, so it would be cheaper to bring goods from West Coast rather than East Coast.
100%.
Because of the difference in transit.
So from Los Angeles, Long Beach, budget around $1,200 US.
1,200. So very similar to
another $100 on top. 100 or 150?
150.
$150 on top.
1,200. That's US.
Yes.
West Coast and East Coast.
And East Coast, $1,600 US. So it's $400 on top. So let's say
16.
Yeah.
So that's the most expensive rate.
Trade, yeah. Well, not the more. You can find more expensive rates in the States. There could be $2,000, $3,000, but it's New York. I'm talking about New York on the East Coast. That's one of the cheapest ports. But yeah, you could pay a lot more if you go inland or some other ports. So just for argument's sake, I'm gonna convert $1,600. You can convert it now. Do you want to add any other ways or hidden costs? How to save money or hidden costs?
Well, we've mentioned already. Don't let your supplier look after the freight. Just do it yourself, because most probably you will save a lot of money there, even though it doesn't seem like it at the first glance, but you will find out there's lots and lots of different hidden fees when you let your supplier to organize freight. So one of the best advices we can ever give to our clients: go on FOB rather than CIF Incoterm. FOB, it's when you look after the freight and insurance and not your supplier.
100%.
And also look after the documents well, make sure they're all correct. Send them to your local forwarder or local agent a few days or weeks in advance so they can check them and they can give you a go. Or if there's some amendments have to be done, do that. And also do know the requirements, the treatment requirements for your cargoes, because they might be very different and you don't want those surprises come up in New Zealand because they can be in thousands.
True. All right, so I've converted $1,600 at the current exchange rate is going to be roughly 3,400 New Zealand dollars.
3,400.
3,400, yes. And then you add 1,100 destination charges, and you have $4,500. Are you talking about the total? Yeah, sorry. So the total is $4,500.
Okay, so the total is 4.5.
4.5, yes, for a 20-foot container, and
that's the East Coast.
No, that's East Coast.
Yeah.
Yes. And for a 40-foot container, around $8,000 for a 40-foot container. All right. If you enjoyed this information, make sure you subscribe, because next week we're gonna talk about some other business tools and tactics, how you can avoid problems and save time and money. Thank you for your time. My name is Max.
Alex here, and I guess we'll see you next week, is it?
Yep. And if you've got any other questions, visit our website, easyfreight.co.nz, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.